Today I'm with Greg Jemmeson from Jemmeson Fisher, Solicitor and Accountants. Good afternoon, Greg.
Afternoon, Brian.
Our subject today is shareholder agreements. Now, more and more larger offices are allowing their employees to have an opportunity of buying shares. How does all this work?
Okay, it's a critical document, is a shareholders agreement. It sets out the parameters of how the business relationship will work, and as you quite rightly point out, there's a big trend in the industry with an ageing principles to allow staff to buy in at various levels. They might be minority shareholders, only buying in maybe 1, 2, 5%, through to people taking a majority share, and principals looking to ease their way out. Now, a shareholders agreement sets up the good governance of a company. It says who can be directors, what the whole idea of the company is, what your aims and objectives are. But the critical thing is it sets out how we deal with disputes. And more importantly, what happens if somebody wants out, how do they get out? Simple way we would do that is if we had two shareholders, equal shareholders, it's what's called a Savoy clause, and quite simply says, Brian, you and I are in business. If I offer to buy you out, I make an offer to you, you either reject that offer or accept that offer, and alternatively I offer to you, I'll buy the business for $500,000, you'll say no, but I'll buy you out, Greg, for $500,000. And that's a very simplistic way to do it.
That's only for two shareholders?
That's where we've got two shareholders. Then we move into where we've got multiple shareholders, 3 or more. Then we have what's called first rights of refusal. So what would happen here is I want to sell my shares and we have 2 other shareholders. I then have to offer them both to you in equal proportions. Then one says, no, I don't want to buy them. Then the other party can take up all of them. There, we will put a clause in there to set out what fair market value is. So we're not disputing what the clause is. We have an arbitrator, a valuer come in, value the business, and then there's no disputes about that.
Okay.
If we can't come to an arrangement then where we buy each other out, and being realistic...
Could 2 of them buy half of each?
Essentially what would happen is it has to be offered in equal proportions to the other parties first, and then if one of the parties says, I don't want to buy them, and there's only one party left, that one party can buy the entire amount. It's all depending on how many parties there are. Then we get down to the situation where, realistically, these are private businesses. There's not really a marketplace for somebody who's not in the industry to want to walk in the door and buy shares. Okay? So then we go to the next level where we say, if nobody else will buy it internally, the next level may be to put it on the open market, and it might be a 3 or 6 month period, and then if that doesn't work, then we wind the business up. There has to be all these steps and mechanisms. The last thing we want to do is one party saying, I'm a minority shareholder, I'm being oppressed, I'm not getting any say in the business, I'm going off to the Supreme Court to get the company wound up. We want to avoid that.
So, Greg, it's quite complicated, I understand that. So what other key areas would they look at?
Okay, a common area we'd look at is what are called tag along and drag along provisions. So I might be a minority shareholder, I've only got 25% of the shares and the other shareholder's got 75%. He finds a prospective purchaser of the business, he doesn't want to be held back by me, so he's got what's called a drag along provision, and he can say anybody with say 60% or more of the shares can drag all the other shareholders along and force them to sell if they get a really good offer. Alternatively, a tag along would be, he's found a buyer and I can say, I want to be tagged along as well and my shares get sold. So those sorts of things we need to look at. We need to have things like dividend policies. Quite often, one of the biggest areas we find that people get all caught up about is they have a salesperson's mentality when going into these businesses, and they look at how much commission am I going to still get out of this business. They're not looking at it as a business, they're looking at it as a form of just still getting as much money as possible. They've got to leave that at the door. They need to still be paid as an employee of the business, but just because you're a shareholder doesn't suddenly mean you get a greater split of the commission than you previously got. The other thing is to look at what would bring a party's shareholding to an end, like default provisions. So that would maybe loss of licence, death, maybe a marriage split up, criminal offence, jail, bankruptcy, all those sorts of things. And those sorts of things bring the matter to an end, whereas it allows the other shareholders to buy out that party's shares. You can even fund yourself through insurance policies to cover those sorts of things.
Look, it's very interesting. As I said, very complicated, and if anyone's thinking of doing it, they need to talk to you first.